we are going to find out who did this, and we're going to hunt them down. Because one of the things that I've said throughout my presidency is, when folks mess with Americans, we go after them. Now, Governor Romney had a very different response. While we were still dealing with our diplomats being threatened, Governor Romney put out a press release trying to make political points. And that's not how a commander-in-chief operates. You don't turn national security into a political issue. Certainly not right when it's happening. And I am ultimately responsible for what's taking place there, because these are my folks, and I'm the one who has to greet those coffins when they come home. You know that I mean what I say.
There were many days that passed before we knew whether this was a spontaneous demonstration or actually whether it was a terrorist attack. And there was no demonstration involved. It was a terrorist attack. And it took a long time for that to be told to the American people. Whether there was some misleading or instead whether we just didn't know what happened, I think you have to ask yourself, why didn't we know 5 days later when the ambassador to the United Nations went on TV to say that this was a demonstration? How could we have not known?
Okay, that, of course, the exchange on Benghazi, the Libyan attack and the aftermath. It became a highlight of the evening last night. Could have been a big opportunity for Mitt Romney, but instead, it appears as though he doubled down, prompting one of President Obama's more memorable moments of the night.
On the day following the assassination of a United States ambassador, the first time that's happened since 1979, when we have 4 Americans killed there, when apparently we didn't know what happened, that the president, the day after that happened, flies to Las Vegas for a political fundraiser, then the next day to Colorado for another event, another political event. I think these actions taken by a president and a leader have symbolic significance.
And nobody's more interested in finding out exactly what happened than I did. The day after the attack, Governor, I stood in the Rose Garden and I told the American people and the world that we were going to find out exactly what happened, that this was an act of terror, and I also said that we're going to hunt down those who committed this crime. And then a few days later, I was there greeting the caskets coming into Andrews Air Force Base and grieving with the families. And the suggestion that anybody in my team, whether the Secretary of State, our UN ambassador, anybody on my team would play politics or mislead when we've lost 4 of our own, Governor, is offensive. That's not what we do. That's not what I do as president. That's not what I do as commander-in-chief.
So the question is, obviously the Benghazi attack and how the Obama administration handled it in the aftermath has been something of a negative for the president for the past few weeks, to say the least. Richard, did the president last night take this negative and turn it into a positive?
Well, I think he reminded people of why he is a commander-in-chief, which is a good thing politically, and which Governor Romney has had a hard time coping with. But what he also did is he took on the right-wing myth machine, which has put out there that somehow the administration was incapable, incompetent, dishonest about this kind of thing.
Well, let me give you an example. Reince Priebus, the head of the RNC, was quoted as saying this: "I will say though that tonight, point blank, the president lied to the lied to the American people about Libya. I think the moderator may have helped that along as well." Candy Crowley correcting the record at some point along the line. We're going to get into that as well a little bit later. But is that the lie that you think that the president was correcting last night? Or is it the whole, look, shouldn't have let it happen in the first place?
The right-wing Republican attack on Obama as a liar, an alien, a foreigner, is part of a way to move him away from the kind of person that Americans would vote for. He effectively rebutted that, not just by what he said, not just by the fact that he showed he had said what he said the day after, but by the demeanor, calm, firm, but very serious rejection of what Romney had said, and the governor did not have any response.
Is this focus on what happened in the days after the attack in Libya at all detracting from the attack itself or the preparations around the attack? And is there more there than we got last night?
Well, I think this has been such an important issue for the Republicans because this is where they have stood to say, while the Obama administration has come out We have, taken out Al-Qaeda. We have, had enormous success in the arena of terrorism, and this is a major point of their foreign policy. The Republicans saw this as a way to make inroads in that, to say, look, they didn't do as well as they said they did. Last night, President Obama was able, with some moral indignation, to stand up there and say, I'm the commander-in-chief, this is what happened, and to take responsibility. He even took the onus off of Hillary Clinton, who's Secretary of State, who had come out, the day or two before and said she took responsibility. So that makes it a little bit difficult. I thought, the moment you didn't play with Candy Crowley fact-checking is one I'm most interested in, because I think that Romney was not exactly wrong about that. The president did use the word terror, but he did not say that the attack was an act of terrorism, which was Romney's point. But Romney was unable to come back on that because the moderator came in, he got moved along, and he lost his footing there. And when you say Romney had a difficult night, I thought it was at that point that Romney really started to falter in the debate and never was able to regain. And it was late. I mean, it was like 10:15 by that point, never able to gain his momentum after that.
That moment should have been his biggest asset. The president Romney's. Okay. Thank you, Romney's. The president and his team. Why do you think Hillary Clinton came out and took responsibility for this? It was a major liability for the president. The right wingers. It seemed like the mud they were throwing as it relates to this issue. Some of it was sticking. It was gaining traction. And so while I understand why Mr. Romney didn't want to go there with the crowd and before 60 million people, in my opinion, he should have continued to hammer away at Mr. President. Why did you go to a fundraiser that night? He let Obama take a major negative and flip it into, he made the president look presidential. He made himself look silly. Mr. Romney, he made himself look like he didn't have his facts right.
I also think that Candy Crowley did nothing wrong.
Oh, she did. She did in a big way. She did in a big way.
We're going to get into that a little bit later.
I can't talk about that now?
No, I'm afraid not. That's embargoed until a little bit later. But just for the low information voters, the voters who tune in occasionally, do you think the president's performance on Benghazi last night swings the issue for him? Because there's a lot of he said, she said.
It's not the facts alone. It's the way he looked. He looked decisive. He looked clear. He looked angry. And at that point, Governor Romney was sitting in the school on a stool, looking like sort of whoops on his face.
Can you keep that look on your? Because you do that pretty well. Can you just keep that?
Well,
that pose?
This is the first time I've ever experienced it, but it turns out.
And he's channeling somebody else as he does it.
And I think it's clear that moment, to their credit, the Obama administration had rehearsed that moment. They knew that attack was coming, and they were ready, and he did it perfectly. I mean, he played that off perfectly. And I agree with Dominic. I'm surprised that Mitt Romney wasn't better prepared to handle that. He basically did not respond after that.
It does make me wonder, though, why Secretary Clinton then sort of fell on the sword if just a few hours later President Obama was going to have that rehearsed answer and sort of take responsibility for it himself. But we're going to leave that question unanswered. We're going to take another break. When we come back, another highlight of the evening, the spooftastic binders full of women comment from none other than Mitt Romney. That is next. Stay with us.